Position yourself in the landscape. Find a vantage point and take in the view. Feel your feet on the ground and situate yourself in this space at this time. Begin to notice the shapes and forms of the landscape around you. Allow your body to open up to this space. Notice your body's felt response to this wide, open space. Observe the landscape's shapes, contours, and features extending into the distance. Allow your noticing to enter the body and slowly begin to move, tracing forms, feelings, shapes, and gradients, extending outwards and into the expansive space beyond. Wide open spaces and extensive vistas present opportunities to consider human proportions and scale. Placing the body in relation to the expanses of open terrain and horizon lines facilitates a reckoning between human proportions and physiological and biomechanical processes of expansion and contraction performed by bodies in their daily functioning and in conscious and deliberate acts of stretching, reaching, expanding and extending beyond a customary sense of reach and kinespheric surround. Wide open spaces enable both reflective contemplation and physical enactment of reaching beyond oneself. For example, processes of imagining and reflecting on life trajectories, experiences and challenges when perched on a hillside and taking in the view, or when physically travelling over and across great distances as an act of endurance. Wide open spaces and the terrains they present, such as mountain ranges, deserts and ice plains, have throughout history presented challenges for athletes, explorers and adventurers to embark on journeys and expeditions and engage with such spaces from a conquering perspective. Opportunities for conquering or consuming such environments and notions of pitting human endeavour against challenging and inhospitable environments reveals the fallacy of such anthropocentric endeavours, as the fleshy reality of such spaces frequently reveal their amorphous potential to seep into human crevices, airways and openings through acts of encroachment and entanglement that vanquish misguided notions of conquering and domination. Alternatively, the co-constitutive nature of body-site relations is revealed in a particular manner, emerging from the temporally prolonged nature of such expeditionary or marathon undertakings. This presentation contains a series of thoughts and observations drawn from my current research into embodied sight dance and movement practice conducted in landscape environments. It draws specifically on my forays into environmental movement practice in the landscape spaces of Surrey and West Sussex in the south of England where I live and work. It draws on my current interest in dance and new materialism, in which I explore how human, non-human matterings occur through site-based movement research, or a form of site-based body practice, as I'm labelling this work at present. New materialist scholarship and practice explores notions of entanglement between human and non-human, and challenges nature-culture binaries. Responding to contemporary global, economic, environmental, and humanitarian crises, new materialist ideas explore the decentering of humans in charge of the world and propose other ways of knowing and doing, in which, to quote Elizabeth Gross, we might surround ourselves with the possibilities of being otherwise. These perspectives inform my current exploration of sight dance practice conducted in nature spaces, specifically wide open spaces and landscapes. Starting from considerations of the body's physiological and anatomical matter, the material body is positioned in this approach in dialogue with a range of physical material contexts. Drawing on the work of feminist new materialists such as Karen Barad, Donna Haraway and Stacia Lamo, the practice encompasses all bodies of matter entangled with lived environments, conceived as bodies of matter and bodies that matter, rendering themselves as significant within mobile interactive encounters. The moving sensate body is employed in this approach as the primary mode of inquiry, conceived as a porous entity in which subjective experience is but one perspective within messy exchanges with lived environments and companion species. As opposed to inferring a hierarchical human-world relationship, the body self is identified as the explorative and speculative instigator in this work, as, in practical terms, it is the primary organism or species system that we can know most about and work with to converse with the non-human or more than human world. A perspective on human-world relations is offered in this research, in which attempts at engaging with enmeshed, non-hierarchical relations and embodied conversations are explored. The outcomes of these interactions, whilst expressed through the moving body, hope to attend to or magnify the agential potential and affective vibrancy of myriad materials, atmospheres, rhythms, textures, and effects encompassed within wide open spaces. A consideration or discussion of elasticity is useful to my project, as it aligns with site-based body practice conducted in wide open spaces in which the expansion and contraction of the dancing body organism into the landscape and vistas beyond a fixed point in space forms the basis of some of the movement tasks and explorations. Physically speaking, the capacity of the human body to expand, contract, and release is a phenomenon common to any dancer who has ever taken a Graham technique class. More broadly, the elasticity of the human body is evident as our lungs expand as we breathe, and blood cells, muscles, and ligaments expand and contract on an ongoing basis. Pupils dilate, spinal columns extend and contract, and hands and fingers expand, encased by the skin's elasticity. As this practice-led research continues to evolve, my interest has expanded to encompass a wider range of physicalized and expansive landscape or naturescape practices, such as endurance running, rock climbing, and wild swimming, that engage bodies in particular ways with expansive nature spaces. Practices of endurance and distance running are referred to alongside site-based body practice as a means of extending considerations of body-site interaction and human nature morphology. Put simply, I'm interested in how landscapes shape the body across practices in physical, experiential, affective, and imaginative ways. What forms or modes of body-site osmosis begin to arise through repeated practice? And what might these interventions in and through the landscape reveal, provoke, or question regarding human, non-human, and more than human material interactions? In his writing on landscape meaning and environmental justice, Kenneth R. Olwig argues against a singular perspective on landscape as a form of environmental scenery or backdrop. To do so, he warns, is to negate broader perspectives and histories of landscape politics that have shaped natural environments through practices of commoning, land management regulation, and political processes such as enclosure, demarcation, and regional structuring. The political, economic, and social landscape through which rural and urban environments are shaped, exploited, and demarcated are, he argues, vital histories to be considered alongside contemporary perceptions of and engagements with landscape and scenic spaces. The type of landscapes I've been engaging with can be defined here as sites shaped and crafted by human interventions, pertinent to English countryside traditions and legacies, such as farming, hunting, mining, settlement, tourism, and transportation. This type of landscape encounter sits apart from experiences of wilderness afforded in other parts of the country, such as the Scottish Highlands, for example, and in other parts of the world. Creating this presentation, it occurs to me that I have never truly experienced a real wilderness or engaged with vast expanses of nature space uncrafted by human intervention or land management processes. Such places reside in my imagination or through the writings and experience of others. Find a location from where you can clearly view the horizon line. Beginning with the center of the body, explore the notion and feel of the horizon line as it plays along and is emulated through your own horizon line, situated below the ribcage and across the solar plexus. Play with this relationship. Beginning gradually, open up this exploration and play with perspective. Begin to shift your focus from the far to the near. Explore the interplay between here and there. Explore the horizon line in relation to the ground beneath you and the expansive sky above. How might you shift your horizon line on its axis? What emerges? Through site-based body practice, the landscape is reframed as a taskscape in Tim Ingold's terms. Stemming from land worker or farming terminology, it denotes a particular form of human-land relationship. Whilst endurance or long-distance runners work away at conquering landscape terrains through persistent practices that position the landscape as a natural feature to be traversed, site dancers work away at a landscape engagement in a different manner, led by the dictates of the environment, in tasks aimed at taking the landscape into the body, dwelling with it in a process that gives expression to the exchange whilst in the landscape, constituting a form of staying with the landscape or staying with the trouble at hand in Haraway's terms. Whilst the long-distance runner's task is also shaped by landscape contours, surfaces and undulations, there is little time to process or reflect on such corporeality in the moment. What does remain and resonate, however, are traces of the landscape encounter at a cellular and muscular level, as the runner's lung capacity, ligaments and muscles and tendons are stretched and shaped by the landscape interaction. Conceptually, the landscape itself is also stretched over and through time, through these activities, as it is carried into and with the body of the runner and the dancer as a trace that intersects with subsequent training terrains and movement interactions. As opposed to the endurance runner's swift consumption and traversal of landscape, however, the notion of a stretched and enduring landscape resonance emerging through site dance practice occurs through a particular form of slow progress. The movement practice allows for and at times demands slowness and stillness, and therefore a different type of enmeshment occurs, marked by moments of lingering, retracing steps, pausing to catch a breath, adjusting footing, shifting body weight, and feeling the wind and sun play across the surfaces of the body and warming the joints. Processes that contrast with the runner's fleeting engagement as she skims over surfaces en route to the next goal or landmark. My quest to explore landscape from a more embodied perspective and avoid male-dominated and at times macho articulations of landscape relations has led me to the work of feminist scholars and the work of artists and authors such as Gretel Ehrlich, Nan Shepherd, Mary Douglas, Marlene Creates, and Barbara Hepworth. Their work sets a symbiotic and oppositional tone to expeditionary and conquering narratives that reinforce nature-culture divides and seek to tame nature spaces and conquer new wildernesses. A more holistic approach is offered by artists such as Hepworth, who observed, "I, the sculptor, am the landscape." Discussing her own sense of porous exchange between herself and the landscapes in which she grew up, she notes, "All my early memories are of forms and shapes and textures. Moving through and over the West Riding landscape with my father in his car, the hills were sculptures, the roads defined the form, and above all, there was a sensation of moving physically over the contours of fullnesses and concavities, through hollows and over peaks, feeling, touching through mind and hand and eye." These early resonances and exchanges between body and landscape infused Hepworth's sculpture throughout her career, and evidence a form of enduring enmeshment in which the resonance of those exchanges stretched across time and space and informed her landscape sensibility over a life course. Through this observation, the ongoing resonance and elasticity of the forms and contours of the West Riding hills and dales is made evident, illustrating the impactful nature of porous exchanges between bodies and sites. Such exchanges and porous practices encountered across a range of artistic and physical practices destabilize hierarchical epistemologies and binary approaches to nature, culture, human, non-human relations. They open up spaces of enmeshment in which perspectives on conquering, enduring, and scaling environments and landscape features become muted against increasingly vital discourses and practices in which exchange, mutuality, slow progress, and codependence become the dominant refrains we move to and move with across and through landscapes in wide, open spaces.